And Energy Minister Michael Fallon. Oh, lights have come on. Could be a harbinger of things to come. He joins me now for the Sunday interview. Michael Fallon, why is the coalition so mismanaged energy policy that there's now talk of the lights going out at times of high demand for electricity?
Well, we inherited a situation where for years Labour hadn't done anything. They hadn't built any new nuclear stations to replace those that were ageing, and simply not enough investment was going into energy. We're changing that. You saw a series of announcements on Thursday. We're accelerating the exploration for shale. We're encouraging more renewables by providing the strike prices so people can invest in renewables. And we're now organising new reserve capacity to come on stream in a few years' time.
How many new power plants have opened under this coalition government?
6 new gas plants, 2 big onshore wind farms, 2 big offshore wind farms, a biomass conversion. So a lot has been done.
No, not all these are up and running.
Yes, they are. 6 gas plants have opened under this government,
and how
2
many
onshore and 2 offshore, and there are more coming.
How many will open between now and 2015?
At least another 4 or 5. So we're catching up.
4 or 5?
4 or 5 offshore and onshore wind farms.
How many gas?
There's 1 gas plant being built at the moment near Manchester. There are 11 others with planning permission. We're catching up, but you do appreciate nothing was done under Labour, and we've got a long way to catch up.
Well, according to the latest report from Ofgem, and that's the official regulator, that spare electricity generating capacity is likely to fall from 14%, which was traditional, to 2%. It doesn't leave much slack, does it?
No, it doesn't. And I think everybody underestimated the fact that some of the coal-fired and oil-fired, the dirtier stations, are coming off the system earlier than was originally anticipated because of our commitments under European Union and international law. That was probably underestimated. And again, we've got to make sure there's enough energy. And I want to reassure you that we are doing that.
What's your estimate of the chance of blackouts?
Oh, low. We're going to make sure they don't happen. I can absolutely tell you that.
You guarantee today there will not be blackouts?
We're not going to have industrial blackouts, factories shut at lunchtime and people sent home or anything like that. We have Ofgem, the regulator, and the National Grid who are charged with making sure that in 2 to 3 years' time that doesn't happen. And they have plenty of tools at their disposal to make sure it doesn't.
Well, let's just look at what the head of SSE has said, one of our biggest utilities, the chief executive there. He says it appears the government is significantly underestimating the scale of the capacity crunch facing the UK in the next 3 years. There's a very real risk of the lights going out as a result.
Well, I don't agree that there's a real risk. There is a risk, of course. There's going to be less capacity, less reserve capacity in 3 years' time, but we've got time to deal with that, and we've got plans to deal with that.
Well, the situation's so serious that Ofgem and the National Grid are looking at paying industrial users of electricity to close down when demand is high. This was put to you on Newsnight. This is how you responded.
And these stories that are going to be running in tomorrow morning's newspapers about how factories and businesses are going to be asked to switch off in order that power isn't cut to people's homes in 2015, are they true?
No.
That wasn't accurate, was it? Ofgem and the National Grid are looking at paying industrial users not to use electricity.
No, let's be clear what tools they have at their disposal, and they've always had at their disposal. They've always had an operating reserve. There are companies that have their own generators who can contract to Ofgem to turn down their power or switch over to their private generators for a certain period if there's a completely unexpected spike in demand. There's nothing new about that. That's existed for 20 years. Secondly, they're looking, and they should be looking, at some recently mothballed plant to make sure the operators of that plant are ready, if that plant is needed, to bring it onto the system.
How long does that take?
Well, that can be done relatively quickly.
Well,
but you
the
don't
gas industry tells me it takes a year to bring a mothball plant back on.
We're talking about a potential tightness in the capacity in 2.5 years' time.
But there is no doubt, Minister.
1 year is plenty of time.
National Grid is talking about a tariff for 2015-16 to give to. It's talked even of paying industrial users not to use electricity between 4 in the afternoon and 8 if there's a danger of blackouts.
You're talking about 2.5 years' time. They have plenty of time to get some mothballed plant onto the system, and they have plenty of time to better balance the system. I can assure you, we're not going to have people sent home at lunchtime or industrial
Well, what
blackouts.
about 4 in the afternoon?
We are going to have the system better
What
managed.
about 4 in the afternoon?
Well, they're not going to use any techniques that they're not already using.
Do
There's
you-
already an operating reserve, and there should be an operating reserve.
But when did the National Grid or Ofgem last pay industrial users not to use electricity?
Well, what they have is they for 20 years, they have them on standby.
When did they last use it?
They haven't had to use
Exactly.
it so far.
And now they're planning that they may have to use it.
They're planning prudently ahead so that if there turns out to be a shortage, and there isn't actually forecast to be a shortage in 2.5 years' time, but if there is a shortage, they will be ready with some mothball plant that was off the system to bring it back on, and there's plenty of time to do that.
Why?
And they will be better. They will be able to balance
If it takes a
the
year,
system.
why is there plenty of time?
Because
You
if-
won't know until there's a winter snap and suddenly we pass this 2% limit.
Yeah,
You
but
don't
you'd be
know
the-
a year before if that's going
You'd
to
be the
happen.
first person to criticise me if we suddenly went out and bought in lots of extra capacity now and added to consumers' bills unnecessarily. Ofgem have to manage their way through this, but what I want to assure you about is we're not going back to any kind of industrial blackouts. Let's be clear about that.
All right. Well, I mean, the reason people are now talking about blackouts, and it's not just the media, it's Ofgem, it's the National Grid,
They're not
it's
talking about
people who
blackouts.
run utility, well, they're talking about having to cope with, is because the previous Labour government and this coalition agreed to phasing out of our existing coal and nuclear energy stations without putting new capacity in place in time. It's a huge failure of government, isn't it?
Yes, Labour accepted all these legal obligations.
Well,
They
so did
signed
you.
up to these European treaties. Well, they were the government.
You voted for
Just
them.
wait for it. They signed up to all these European treaties, but they didn't do the other thing, which was to invest in new stations to replace the coal-fired stations and the oil-fired stations that were being taken off the system. That was the appalling failure of underinvestment under Labour.
Why don't you delay the closure of the coal-fired stations until you've done something about new capacity?
Well, the operators of these stations are able to do that, and some they have slowed down the closure, but there are legal limits on the amount of dirty power that they can generate, and they have to respect European Union law there.
Well, you say that, but why are we doing what the EU tells us? We're closing our coal-fired stations when Germany is building 12 new coal-fired stations using lignite, which is just about the dirtiest coal available.
Well, Germany and some of these other countries were further ahead on renewable electricity than we were.
They're building
We were-
12 coal stations.
Yeah, but they have more renewable electricity and we don't. Now, we accepted, it wasn't our government, we signed up to all these obligations. But when you sign up to obligations to have more, to have fewer coal-fired stations, then you've got to undertake to have the new investment to go alongside it.
So what's more important, obeying a Brussels directive or keeping the lights on?
Well, keeping the lights on is the job of the government.
So you could break the Brussels directive
not planning.
if it was necessary to keep the lights on.
Well, keeping the lights on is the first priority, but we're not planning to break any particular law. We've got time to deal with this situation, and let me reassure you, we are dealing with it.
All right. Look at what, one of the way you're dealing with it is doing more wind. Look at what was in the Telegraph just recently. Onshore wind farms will get £100 a megawatt hour when the market rate for electricity is currently less than 50. Offshore will get triple the market rate at 155 megawatt hours, described by city analysts as, quote, astonishingly expensive. And it's businesses and households that will pick up the tab in their bills for this astonishingly expensive handout.
Well, first you say we're going to be short of energy, and when there's investment you need to build to provide new energy, then you're criticising that. You can't have that both ways. Now look, we've cut the cost of onshore wind. We cut the subsidy this year. We look at the
You've
cost of
increased it again?
No, we've cut it this year. We reduced it in April, and we review the cost each year in conjunction with the industry to make sure that it is more cost effective, and we're doing the same with offshore wind.
The wind industry gets 2 or 3 times the market rate, and we pay for that in our bills, correct?
Andrew, you won't get people to build a wind farm or a nuclear power station or even a gas plant unless they can be sure they can get the electricity it generates onto the system.
Well, you say,
if you want new investment, it has to be paid
Well,
for.
I'm interested that you think wind is a way that will avoid the blackouts, because you've talked about all the new capacity. Let's just look. This is a snapshot of what was generating our electricity at noon yesterday. Coal, 31%. You're closing a lot of that. Gas, 30%. There's a hiatus in new gas coming on. Nuclear, 23%. You're closing a lot of that. Wind, 2%. even though we have 9 gigawatts of wind capacity, when the wind doesn't blow, you don't get power.
You don't in June, no. You do at other months, and all these... what you need, of course...
Sorry, Minister, just to interrupt you, I can show you a figure from February of this year when it was cold,
10,
and also when it was 0.2%.
Yeah, and some days it's over 10, and last time I went down to the national grid to see this, by the way, it was at 6.3. Wind is an important thing, but the lesson of this is you need more of all these sources of energy. If we're to avoid the reserve getting tighter and tighter, we need more people to invest in a mix of energy so we're more secure.
Households and businesses will also have to stump up for the new nuclear capacity that you're trying to build, but of course haven't yet. EDF is the big French electricity utility. It's big in this country. It, like the wind suppliers, it wants twice the market price as a guarantee before it goes ahead with Hinkley Point. And we'll have to subsidise that too as consumers, won't we?
We haven't fixed the price for Hinkley yet. We're still negotiating with EDF. I can't tell you what the actual strike price is going to be. But what I can tell you is this is a huge investment, a 30, 40-year investment into nuclear power, and it doesn't come for free.
No, but they have you over a barrel, don't you? Because there's no one else able to build these stations quickly. So either you agree to EDF's price, subsidy, or it doesn't happen in the immediate future.
If that was true, we'd have agreed back at Christmas when the last deadline was set. We have other nuclear operators coming in. We have Hitachi negotiating to build 2 more plants, one in Wales, one in Gloucestershire.
That's a long way away, Minister, as you know.
No, on the contrary. They're organising supply chain conferences at the moment. They discuss with me. We have other investment coming in to potential sites at Sellafield and at Sizewell and elsewhere. The nuclear industry is picking up now after years of neglect under Labour.
Well, of course, the other thing that we've known for years now is that Britain's sitting on a sea of natural gas. It's called shale. The British Geographical Survey has just confirmed that we have at least 43 years of the stuff to keep the lights on. But the coalition has dithered and delayed on this as well.
Well, there was no delay. We announced on Thursday that we're getting serious about shale. We published the incentives for exploration. We have simplified the planning system. We've standardised the system of environmental permits they need, and we're ensuring that communities who host shale drilling will benefit from them.
You had a 2-year moratorium on this,
yes,
Minister.
That's because...
You had a 2-year moratorium.
That's because, as you know, during some of the drilling there was some seismic activity, and we needed to be absolutely sure that this stuff can be drilled safely and protecting the environment.
Well, let me just show you what happened with these so-called earthquakes from the experts at Durham University. The size and number of earthquakes caused by fracking is low compared to other man-made triggers such as mining, geothermal activity or reservoir water storage. Do you regret that 2-year moratorium now?
No, I think it's important to reassure people. Hydraulic fracturing for gas is a relatively new technique in this country. It's important to build public consent for it, but the moratorium's finished now. We've fired the starting gun, and we have a lot of companies now beginning the search for shale, and we're going to make very sure that we explore its full potential.
But as a result of the 2-year moratorium, the shale gas will not be on stream in any significant quantities, if at all, in time to cope with any of the 2015-16 possible blackouts, correct?
No, not necessarily. They're exploring for shale at the moment. They're drilling for shale. Shortly they'll start hydraulic fracturing for shale. That certainly takes 2 or 3 years.
They're only doing exploratory drilling at the moment, Minister. They're not actually drilling for shale.
I appreciate that, but you know, this industry is in its infancy here in this country. They have to have various permissions. They have to get those lined up. They have to reassure us they can do it safely without damaging the environment. But shale could well make an important contribution to the chart that you showed.
Just to sum up, there's a danger of blackouts for 15-16. You will have no new nuclear on by then to do it. You will have none or very little shale on and no new gas capacity by then. It's a mess of an energy policy.
No, I completely reject that. We have Ofgem taking prudent measures now to make sure there is a mothball plant that is ready to come back onto the system, to ensure that companies manage their demand where they're able to use private generators if there's an unexpected peak. And this week we announced a whole series of measures to make sure there is new plant coming onto the system and that the search for shale gas is being accelerated, not slowed down.
Michael Fallon, thank you.